Both sides just declared victory. Both sides are still armed, and one side is lying. Here is every fact you haven't been told. At 6:07 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday, April 7, 2026, less than 2 hours before U.S. jets were scheduled to destroy every bridge, every power plant, and every piece of civilian infrastructure in a country of 90 million people, Donald Trump posted on Truth Social. He called it a ceasefire. He called it a big day for world peace. He said the United States had met and exceeded every military objective. He said Iran could begin reconstruction. He said this could be the golden age of the Middle East. 20 minutes later, Iran's foreign minister confirmed acceptance. And then Iran's Supreme National Security Council issued its own statement. And what it said is the most important thing you will hear today. It said nearly all of Iran's objectives have been achieved. It listed what Iran claims the United States agreed to: lifting all sanctions, releasing frozen Iranian assets, withdrawing U.S. combat forces from every military base in the region, paying reparations to Iran, and guaranteeing Iran's permanent right to nuclear enrichment. It then added one sentence that every headline missed. This does not signify the termination of the war. Our hands remain upon the trigger. 2 countries, 2 press releases, 2 completely different wars that apparently just ended. If you want to understand what actually happened and what is about to happen in Islamabad on Friday, stay with this, because the next 90 seconds will change how you read every headline for the next 2 weeks. Here is the question no anchor is asking. If Trump says Iran agreed to a complete, immediate, and unconditional reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran's foreign minister agreed to safe passage with Iranian military coordination and, quote, due consideration of technical limitations, which version is true? Because those are not the same sentence. And the first time an oil tanker tries to sail that strait without Iranian permission, the world will find out which version the IRGC believes. And if you find this kind of analysis useful, the kind that reads the actual documents and not just the press releases, subscribing takes 1 second, and it means you won't miss what happens in Islamabad on Friday. Go back to the morning of April 7th, because that morning is the key to understanding everything. At approximately 9 a.m., Trump posted, "A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again." He added, "I don't want that to happen, but it probably will." That is the President of the United States predicting the civilizational erasure of 90 million people before lunch. U.S. and Israeli jets were already in the air as he typed it. The South Pars petrochemical complex, the largest natural gas field on Earth, shared between Iran and Qatar, was being struck. Karg Island, through which 80% of Iran's oil exports flow, was hit for the first time. Mashar's petrochemical zone was burning. Oil was at $150 a barrel. Jet fuel was being rationed at airports in Italy. Iran's deputy minister of youth was on state television asking young Iranians to form human chains around power plants to shield them with their bodies. And then, with less than 2 hours until the deadline, the ceasefire appeared. Here is what the markets did not know when they celebrated. Oil dropped 13% in 60 minutes, from $115 to below $92. One of the largest single-hour price collapses in trading history. The S&P 500 futures surged. Markets in Asia opened higher. Analysts called it relief. But here is the question the markets cannot price. The Strait of Hormuz was not reopened Tuesday night. It was promised to be reopened, with Iranian military coordination on Iranian terms, subject to technical limitations. The oil market bought the promise. What happens to that 13% recovery the first time an Iranian commander decides the ceasefire does not apply to him? Because that question is already being answered. Missile alerts sounded in Israel and the UAE after the 8 p.m. ceasefire deadline. The Associated Press reported that IRGC commanders, who have operated independently of Iran's political leadership throughout this entire war, may not have received or may not have accepted the ceasefire terms. Within hours of the announcement, Israel issued evacuation warnings in Lebanon, including Beirut's southern suburbs. Israeli Defense Forces airstrikes continued in Lebanese territory. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif had announced the ceasefire includes Lebanon. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's office said in 5 words, "The ceasefire does not include Lebanon." Sharif said yes. Netanyahu said no. Trump did not clarify. 12 hours after the ceasefire was announced, U.S. Vice President JD Vance, speaking from Budapest, used one word to describe it. He called it fragile. The Vice President of the United States called his own administration's ceasefire fragile 12 hours after announcing it. That word tells you more about the stability of what was achieved on April 7th than every official celebration from every capital combined. This channel documents what is verified. Subscribe and enable notifications because Friday's Islamabad talks are where this ceasefire either becomes a permanent agreement or publicly collapses. Now, here is the part of this story that changes the entire geopolitical picture, and almost no major outlet has covered it proportionally. Pakistan brokered this deal. Field Marshal Asim Munir, Pakistan's army chief, spent 5 consecutive days without sleep, according to sources, on calls with Vance, Witkoff, and Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif led the public announcement and invited both delegations to Islamabad. China's foreign ministry confirmed that Foreign Minister Wang made 26 diplomatic phone calls to counterparts across the region. Beijing's special Middle East envoy shuttled between Gulf capitals building support for a joint Chinese-Pakistani peace framework. The United States did not architect this ceasefire. The United States accepted a ceasefire that Pakistan built and China supported. Read that again. The country that launched Operation Epic Fury, that threatened civilizational destruction, accepted terms delivered by Pakistan. That is not an editorial opinion. That is the documented sequence of events. And every government on Earth is quietly absorbing what that sequence means for American leadership in the 21st century. Here is what 40 days of Operation Epic Fury actually produced, measured against its own stated objectives. The objectives, as described by U.S. officials, were preventing Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, dismantling Iran's military capability, regime change, and reopening the Strait of Hormuz on American terms. The results: Iran's enriched uranium stockpile remains inside Iran. Iran's Supreme National Security Council explicitly listed nuclear enrichment rights as a point in its victory framework. The Islamic Republic is still governing. The supreme leader was killed on February 28th and was replaced by his son within days. The Strait of Hormuz is partially open under Iranian coordination with technical limitations. Not one of the 4 stated objectives has been fully achieved. And the war cost 13 American lives, 365 Americans wounded, and 40 days of oil at above $100 a barrel. Now count what the human ledger shows on the Iranian side. More than 2,000 people killed, at least 220 children under the age of 18. The youngest was under 12 months old. At least 254 women, more than 1,400 killed in Lebanon. 7,800 targets struck across Iran. Hospitals hit. Universities hit. Residential areas hit. Legal experts at NPR and Time magazine documented that Trump's specific threats to destroy power plants, water treatment facilities, and bridges constitute war crimes under the Geneva Conventions. The UN Secretary General warned the United States publicly. The new Pope Leo IX, the first American-born pope in history, called the attacks on civilian infrastructure a sign of, quote, the hatred and destruction the human being is capable of. Trump, asked Monday whether he was concerned about committing war crimes, said no. The ceasefire was announced before those final strikes were executed. The legal questions will not disappear because a ceasefire was posted on Truth Social. The Islamabad talks begin Friday. VP Vance leads the American delegation. Iran's delegation has been told by their Supreme National Security Council that the war has not terminated. Israel says Lebanon is not included. The IRGC says its hands remain on the trigger. The enriched uranium is still in Iran. The Islamic Republic is still standing. The strait is open on Iranian terms. Trump called it the golden age of the Middle East. That phrase will either be remembered as the beginning of something historic or as the most consequential gap between rhetoric and reality in modern American foreign policy. Friday will begin to tell us which one. If you have watched this far, you already understand this story better than most people who will vote on its consequences. Share this before Friday. The Islamabad talks begin in days, and both delegations are arriving with completely different understandings of what was agreed Tuesday night. We will be here, documents open, verified facts only, covering every development. Subscribe now, enable notifications, and answer one of these 3 questions below, because the most analytical responses will be featured. Question A. Iran's Supreme National Security Council claims the U.S. agreed to its 10-point framework, including nuclear enrichment rights, sanctions relief, reparation payments, and U.S. military withdrawal from the region. Trump said Iran's points are a workable basis to negotiate, not an agreement. When Vance sits across from Iran's delegation in Islamabad on Friday, and they present that 10-point list as agreed terms, what does he say? Question B. Pakistan brokered this ceasefire. China made 26 phone calls to support it. The U.S. accepted it. If the Islamabad talks collapse and war resumes, who leads the next peace effort? And does America still have the diplomatic credibility to be in that room? Question C. The enriched uranium is still in Iran. The nuclear program was the stated justification for 40 days of war, 13 American deaths, and 7,800 strikes. If Iran's right to enrichment is ultimately accepted in the final agreement, what did Operation Epic Fury actually change? Drop your answer below. Every comment is read. The most analytical responses get featured. And if this is the kind of journalism you want more of, the subscription button is right there.